A storm on the horizon. The vastness of space stretched endlessly beyond the Imperial Palace's high observation chamber, its dark expanse broken only by the soft glow of distant stars. The world beneath, Votaris Prime, had stood for 1,000 years as the seat of an empire that had never known defeat. From this chamber, Emperor Delros watched over his dominion, his twin hearts pulsing steadily with the confidence of one who had never tasted fear. But tonight was different. A subtle tension rippled through the air, an unease that even the towering Idari generals in their ceremonial armor could not entirely suppress. Before the Emperor, a massive holoscreen flickered with the image of a vast fleet, his fleet, positioned at the far edge of the Votarian expanse, awaiting his command. Their formation was impeccable, a disciplined wall of destruction, warships bristling with enough firepower to reduce planets to dust. And yet, for the first time in history, they had no idea what they were up against. The cause of this uncertainty stood in the center of the war chamber, encased in a shimmering energy field. The prisoner was unlike any the Empire had ever encountered. A human. She had been captured drifting in the wreckage of a derelict vessel, a ship of unknown design, found floating at the edge of Imperial space, its markings indecipherable. At first, they had assumed it was a rogue pirate craft, a lost relic of some forgotten species. But the moment they had scanned her biology, the alarms had sounded through the Imperial research halls. She was something that should not exist. Humanity, according to every official record, was a dead race, a myth long erased from history. The Council had ensured that every trace of them was purged, every record expunged, every whisper silenced. They had been a civilization that once stood on the brink of galactic power, only to be eradicated before they could become a threat. And yet here she was. She stood tall, despite her restraints, her expression devoid of fear. Her dark eyes studied her captors with an intensity that made the generals shift uneasily. Her uniform was torn, her face marked with the grime of battle, but there was something in her posture that made even the battle-hardened Idari warriors hesitate. It was not desperation. It was certainty. Emperor Delros approached the containment field, his heavy cloak dragging behind him. His massive form dwarfed the prisoner, his crimson eyes studying her as if she were some exotic creature from the unknown fringes of the galaxy. "You are human." His voice rumbled through the chamber, ancient and absolute. The woman smirked, tilting her head slightly. "That's one way to put it." The Emperor's brow furrowed. "Your kind was wiped from existence long ago." The Council ensured it. "There is no record of your survival." She chuckled. "Yeah, you're real good at erasing records." One of the generals stepped forward, his scaled fingers tightening around the handle of his ceremonial blade. "You will tell us how you survived." The woman exhaled through her nose, her smirk widening. "I don't need to tell you anything," she said, her voice calm. "You're about to find out for yourselves." A low murmur spread through the war room. The generals exchanged glances, their instincts tingling with something they could not define. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. "You speak as if your people still exist." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto his. "Oh, we do." A silence followed that seemed to stretch through eternity. Then, somewhere in the distance, a warning siren blared. The Emperor's eyes flickered to the holoscreens, where his fleet hung motionless in the vastness of space. Nothing had changed. No new ships had appeared. No enemy signals had been detected. And yet the alarms screamed through the capital, as if some invisible doom had descended upon them. "Report." The Emperor's voice was sharp, controlled. A communications officer frantically worked at his console, his taloned fingers moving with desperate urgency. "Sire, we are detecting gravitational distortions across the outer perimeter." Another officer's screen flickered, his eyes widening. "Something's here. Something massive." The war room shook violently, a deep tremor rolling through the palace, like a distant quake. The containment field around the human flickered for a brief moment, just enough for her to glance up at the ceiling with a knowing expression. Right on time. The holoscreens flashed red, Data streams scrolling too fast to process. The outer defense grid, built to withstand planetary sieges, was failing instantly. The fleet's communication channels collapsed in a flood of unreadable static. Then one of the officers screamed. The main display shifted, revealing something that should not have been possible. The Imperial fleet was vanishing. One by one, their warships were being erased from existence, not by weapons, not by explosions, but by something far worse. Their sensor data simply ceased to recognize them. The mighty vessels that had ruled the stars for 1,000 years were becoming nothing more than fading echoes in the void. And then, out of the darkness, they appeared. Silent, colossal, human. Sleek black warships, their surfaces void of markings, their forms shifting against the fabric of reality itself. No energy readings, no transmissions, not even a sound. The Emperor's breath caught in his throat. Impossible. The woman behind him grinned. No. She stepped forward, her restraints falling away as if they had never been there at all. We just learned. She raised her hand toward the holoscreen, where the human warships had now fully emerged. You erased us. The first Votarian battlecruiser exploded, torn apart by an unseen force before it could even react. Another ship imploded as its gravity wells reversed, folding in on themselves like crumpled paper. The woman's eyes gleamed in the glow of the destruction. Now it's our turn. The war room descended into chaos, and the 1,000-year empire began to crumble. The fall begins. The war room trembled with distant explosions, their force reverberating through the walls of the Imperial Palace. The holoscreens flickered, struggling to process the unfolding catastrophe. One by one, the Emperor's warships were being erased from existence, not through brute force, but through something far more terrifying. They were simply disappearing. Emperor Delros gripped the edge of his throne, his claws sinking into the polished obsidian. His 1,000-year empire, built through conquest and absolute dominion, had never faced an enemy it could not crush. Until now. His voice, steady despite the chaos, carried across the chamber. Tactical report. What is happening to our fleet? A general, his ceremonial armor now useless in the face of this nightmare, struggled with the data streams. Sire, the warships are vanishing. No weapon signatures, no known energy readings. It's as if they are being rewritten out of reality. That's not possible, Delros hissed. A cold laugh echoed behind him. The human woman, once a prisoner, now stood completely unrestrained, arms crossed as she watched the unraveling empire with a calm, knowing gaze. You still don't get it, do you? She said, tilting her head. This isn't just an attack. This is your reckoning. Delros turned sharply to face her, his massive form casting a shadow over her. Your people were wiped from existence. The council saw to it. Your civilization was erased. The woman's smirk widened. Yeah, you tried. The war room's lights dimmed, emergency protocols activating as the Imperial defense grid collapsed. A new signal appeared on the holoscreen, a distorted transmission, broadcasting in the Empire's own language, but laced with something unnatural, something that made the battle-hardened generals stiffen in fear. It was a voice, and it spoke only one word. Retribution. The room plunged into silence. Then, all at once, the holograms filled with movement, black warships emerging like specters from the void, moving without sound, without warning, without mercy. The Imperial fleet, the greatest armada in history, had been caught in a trap centuries in the making. The woman took a step forward, her voice casual. You thought you won. You thought wiping us out would keep you safe. But humans, we don't just disappear. We adapt. We remember. And most importantly, the holoscreens flickered violently as the Imperial Command Center lost control of the fleet's systems. We learn. A flagship, one of the Emperor's personal war vessels, detonated in a blinding explosion as an invisible force crushed its hull like a dying star imploding in on itself. Another ship followed. then another, then 10 more. It was a massacre. Delros rose to his full height, rage and desperation warring in his crimson eyes. We are the Empire. We have ruled for 1,000 years. This is impossible. The woman finally looked at him directly, her gaze unwavering. You ruled for 1,000 years. Another warship was torn apart mid-transit, its pieces scattering into the void before it could even fire a single shot. The Emperor's breath hitched. For the first time in his immortal reign, he felt something alien. Fear. A general collapsed to his knees, his scales paling. Sire, we need to order a full retreat. The fleet is being wiped out. Delros whirled on him, his voice raw with fury. There is nowhere to run. The human woman tilted her head. You finally understand. She reached out, placing a single hand on the command console. The Emperor's personal encryption codes failed instantly, the system folding under the unseen might of human ingenuity. And then, the palace defenses shut down. The Emperor barely had time to process it before the first strike hit Boteris Prime directly. The impact sent a shockwave tearing through the city, obliterating entire districts in an instant. The sky, once clear and golden, darkened as fire and smoke consumed the horizon. The 1,000-year empire was dying. And the silent human warships had only just begun. The unseen war. The ground shook violently, sending deep fractures through the marble floors of the Imperial war chamber. The once pristine walls of the palace groaned under the force of the orbital bombardment, each tremor signaling the death of another city, another stronghold, another piece of the 1,000-year empire shattering into dust. Emperor Delros struggled to keep his footing as another explosion rippled across the planet. The sky outside darkened with flames and debris. The Imperial fleet, once the most feared armada in the known galaxy, was being picked apart like prey caught in the jaws of an unseen predator. 1,000 years of conquest. Gone. In a single night. The war room was chaos. Generals screamed into failing communication links, desperate for orders that would never come. Strategists frantically pulled at flickering holograms, only to watch their fleet status turn from red to black as each ship was erased from existence. And through it all, the human prisoner stood completely still. She watched the destruction with calm, measured eyes, her arms folded as if she had already known this was how it would end. She had. The Emperor turned to her, his crimson eyes wild with fury, his breath heavy with rage and fear. What have you done? He roared, his voice shaking the walls. The woman didn't flinch. We waited. A distant boom sent dust cascading from the high ceilings, cracks spreading through the stone pillars of the war room. You don't win against us, Emperor, she continued. Not forever. You tried to erase us. You thought that would be enough. But humans, we don't die easy. Her gaze flickered toward the main holoscreen, where another squadron of human warships emerged from the void, moving in eerie silence. And we never forget. The Emperor lunged at her, his massive claws swiping through the air, only to pass straight through a flickering holographic projection. The woman's image glitched for a moment, then smirked. Oh, right. Did I forget to mention? I'm not actually there. Delros stumbled back, his mind racing. She had never been a prisoner. She had never been on this planet. The transmission had been a distraction, a message delivered straight to the heart of his empire while the real war had already begun. The realization hit him like a blade to the chest. Humanity hadn't come to fight a war. They had come to end one. Across the chamber, the command console flickered, suddenly overridden with a new data stream. The remaining generals turned their heads just in time to see a message burn itself into the holographic display. A single line of text. Stand down or be erased. A chill settled over the room. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire was no longer in control. The generals turned to their emperor, waiting for his command. For the first time in his reign, he had none to give. The human woman's projection tilted her head. Your empire is dead. You just haven't realized it yet. Dalrose's breathing was ragged. His mind screamed at him to fight, to retaliate, to strike back against these ghosts from the past. But what was left to fight with? The fleet was gone. The planetary defenses had collapsed. The Empire's greatest minds were powerless against an enemy that had planned this attack for centuries. And worst of all, they had never seen it coming. Dalrose's clawed hand tightened into a fist, his body trembling not with rage, but with horrified realization. 1,000-year empire crushed in a single night. And the enemy? The enemy had never even raised their voices. The woman's image flickered once more, and her final words echoed through the dying war room. You should have finished the job. The transmission cut out, and the Empire fell into silence.